Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and in this episode, I'm going to take you on a trip around the globe as we look at some foreign comics that I have. Now, it's just some of the foreign comics in my collection. That's because these are specifically comics that I have gotten at stores while traveling overseas. Whenever I go to a foreign country, I try and visit their comic book stores if I can, and I pick up comics from that area as a souvenir if I can do it. Some of the countries I've been to, either they don't have comic stores or I wasn't able to get to them. For instance, I went to Iceland. I think they only have one comic book store in Iceland, and though we tried to find time to go, I just wasn't able to get to it. So that's a disappointment there. And there have been a couple other places that they just didn't have a store or whatever. But most of the countries that I've been to, or a number of them anyway, I've been able to get to comic stores and come home with some souvenirs, either local comics or comics that were reprinting. A lot of them are reprinting American comics. So I thought it might be fun to go through some of these, tell you the stories of how I got these and the trips that I've been on. I love traveling and I love comics, so it's sort of a perfect little sub-collection here. I do have some other foreign comics that I've gotten for one reason or another, just because they're interesting, and maybe at some point I'll show off a couple of those because some of them are pretty neat. But these are ones specifically that I've gotten on various trips that I've taken. So I'm going to start off here with the first one that I got on one of my trips. It's the Captain Britain Summer Special 1980. I've been to England a couple times. The first time was in 1999. That's when I got this. We went to a couple comic book stores. I kind of regret not loading up on Pence variants. But when I was at one of the stores, I picked this up. And it's an interesting period in the history of Captain Britain. The weekly comic had ended, but the revival with the Alan Moore stuff hadn't started yet. That was still a few years away, so he's still in his original costume here. One of the big draws for me is the back cover, which has this giant Kirby pinup with Captain Britain and Captain America together. For those of you who don't know and who are Captain America fans, the original Captain Britain series in the 70s had a long storyline with Captain America that was never printed in the United States. You can get it now in collected editions of those Captain Marvel books. I have Captain Marvel collected editions specifically for those Captain America stories. But yeah, really cool. The coloring is a little bit weird. Captain America's face seems awful red to me, but just a really cool Kirby image. So that's my souvenir that I brought home from England the first time I had a chance to visit there. This is a much more recent pickup, still in the bag. This is a Supergiant number 18. I got this on my honeymoon. Just at the beginning of this year. Well, it was over the holidays, so I don't remember exactly when I picked this up. It might have technically been the last week of last year. As you can see from the cover, this is reprinting Werewolf by Night. It's interesting. On the inside, the whole thing isn't Werewolf by Night. Actually, there are a bunch of Atlas era horror stories that are reprinted in here. There's some other cool stuff reprinted in here as well, but it's the main draw, of course, is the Werewolf by Night. And there's also some features in here that are not from Atlas. They're actually not from America at all, I don't think. Like Gora Gopal and the Sword of Fire. I think there's some Australian stuff mixed in here. There's Nyoka the Jungle Girl, that's American, but there's a couple cool features in here. Here's a Dick Turpin story Not sure where that originally came from. Dick Turpin, I think, is a British. Yeah, it's neat. I was just going through here real quick to see if there's any cool house ads, because some of these have some really neat house ads for like other titles and stuff. But yeah, I picked this up, as you could see from the sticker. It was $5 New Zealand, which is about $3 American. And this it doesn't have a date on it, but I'm pretty sure it was late 70s. I couldn't find a comic book store. Well, that's not true. There were comic book stores in Auckland, but they were closed when we were there for the New Year's. That's something that I actually have run into on a few of these trips I'll talk about, is we tend to travel over the holidays, and sometimes, here in the U.S., it's like holidays, religion, everything's open. Who cares? We just want to sell. But some of these other countries, they completely shut down for some of these holidays. We ran into that in a couple of the other countries that I'll show you here. But I managed to find this at a used bookstore. They did have a few other comics, but they were mostly American comics. This was the one, like, sort of old New Zealand edition that I could find, and that's specifically what I wanted as a souvenir. So here's an interesting batch of comics. It is 4 issues still in their poly bags that they came in, of Crisis on Infinite Earths, and it's the Peruvian edition. I went to Peru in 2014, and these were on the stands at that time. I don't know why they were just printing these in 2014, almost 30 years later, but they were. So I picked up, I've got issue 3, issue 6, issue 11, and also issue 12. It's interesting, down in Peru, the publisher has the rights not just to DC, but also to Marvel. So the back cover is actually an ad for Wolverine. So that's something you're not going to see on the American versions, of course, is advertisements for the other companies. I got these in Cusco as a classic old newsstand on the street. So that was cool. I did also pay quite a bit of money to get an American Betty and Veronica digest to read on the plane ride home. That was at the airport, and that was a significant amount of more expensive there than it is here, because they had to import it from the U.S. But these, being printed in Peru, were actually really cheap. Everything in Peru at that time, the exchange rate was quite favorable. Everyone in Peru was really nice. I got sick in Peru. I ended up contracting like a virus that set off neuropathy. So I'm left with some long-term degenerative nerve condition from my trip to Peru. It sounds a lot more romantic than it actually is, but people were like, I mentioned the neuropathy to doctors. They're like, "Oh, what's that from?" And I'm like, I caught a mysterious virus at Machu Picchu. But, it's not like I got the curse of the Incans here. This is, just whatever. But it's fine. It's fine. At least I came away with some issues of Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, this is a lot closer to home for me. This is from Quebec. My wife, when we were dating, we went up to Quebec one year for Christmas. And this was 2016. And I knew that there were some French, editions, the French publishers. And I really wanted to get this. There was a cool comic book store that we found in Quebec City, in the old city, and they didn't have any of the French editions. They had new comics that were in French, but they mostly had American comics in English, since that's what the comic collectors want. And a lot of these countries, the American originals are considered to be the authentic versions, and that's what the collectors want. And that makes it sometimes a little tricky for me to find what I want, because I want their versions of things, you know. But we stumbled into this used bookstore elsewhere in Quebec City, and they had a box of the old Heritage Edition French reprint comics from the 70s for $1 each. It's very low grade, and you can see along the edge here, it's all chewed up. But it's one of my favorite issues of Captain America. It's reprinting 156, I think this is, where the Cap of the 70s fighting. And so I was really happy to get this. It was $1. It's got a really cool ad on the back cover, a house ad for some of their other titles. Here's Conan, Iron Man, and Thor, but also they have Cherie, which is where they do their romance comics, and that's a mix of reprints from different publishers. The Cheyenne Kid, of course, is a Charlton title, and then Phantoms, don't recognize it at all, although I have a feeling it could be a French comic that they're reprinting here. The composition, to me, it reminds me of L.B. Cole a little bit. So this is a really cool souvenir of our trip to Quebec. I wish I had bought a lot more than just the one. They had a bunch of the Conans. I didn't get any of those. I think they might have had a couple issues of Cherie, and now I'm like, oh, I wish I had bought those issues of Cherie. But yeah, so this is Quebec City. Here's a cool book. It's Thor and the Avengers, number 218. This is common in a lot of these, where, and we're going to see it when the next one is like this as well, where they'll have a title and they'll reprint other material. In this case, the series is Thor, but they also reprint issues of Avengers in it as well. I don't know if they only do the issues with Thor, or if they'll put in other Avengers stories. A lot of these foreign editions are on a different publishing schedule. Like in Mexico, they were weekly. And so they ran out of the material very quickly, and different countries had different ways they handled that. But in this case, they handled it by adding in issues of Avengers and reprinting those as well. This is from the Count Nefarious storyline, which in America ran in issues 164 to 166. I think this is the cover of 166. Classic story by Jim Shooter with John Byrne artwork. And I'll just pop this one open so we can take a look at some of the stuff on the inside. A lot of the foreign editions are in black and white, but this is actually full color, which is fairly rare. Most of notice that there's also, like, each page has some notes that were made on the original art to keep them in order. So there's some Captain America reprints in the back. There's actually an issue X-Men in here, so it has absolutely nothing to do at all with Thor or the Avengers. But yeah, so that's cool. This copy's seen a little bit better days. The bottom staple's busted off, but whatever. So I went to Rome. I got this at a comic book store in Rome. I went there in 2009. That was a situation where I'd had very little money at the time, but I had a little bit in my savings account, and just keep this here so you can look at it. This tremendous deal on the flight came up, and I was like, I'm never gonna see this again probably. So I just bought the plane ticket, stayed at hostels, and hoofed it around, and spent like 2 hours getting to this comic store. I had to take this train across town and then a bus and then walk for like 45 minutes. But I finally found this comic store way off in the suburbs of Rome. They had an Avengers #1 there, an American Avengers #1 for $2,000. But they also had just a handful of these. So I was really excited to get this as a souvenir from a trip to Italy. And yeah, so that's the story of this one. Next one's really cool. It's Superman 391, although you can see that in fact it's actually the first issue of Mike Grell's Green Arrow, and I've had it signed here by Mike Grell on the Superman logo. I got this in Copenhagen. My cousin lives in Copenhagen with her husband, and he had this box of comics, and he told me I could take whatever I wanted, and I wanted to take a bunch of them, but I couldn't fit them in my luggage, so I ended up with only a handful. But the main one that I really wanted was this one. I'm a huge fan of Green Arrow. I've got a complete run of the Grell series, and it was just so cool to see this first issue of Green Arrow with this super cool Grell cover. But again, over there, their flagship title is Superman, and they basically just print, I guess, whatever DC stuff they feel like here. So issue 391, this is cover dated July 1993. So it's they're a few years behind here on Green Arrow. And it says Grand Pill. I assume that means Green Arrow. It does cover up a little bit of the artwork in an unfortunate way. I think they probably could have put this down here or something, but whatever. Super cool. Love the yellow logo on the black background. And again, I was just really excited to get this signed by Mike Grell. So this was a cool trip. I visited a couple other countries while I was there, but I wasn't able to find a comic book store when I went to Oslo in Norway, so I don't have anything from there. But this represents that trip and my visit to Copenhagen. Finally, I've got 3 more countries and some more comics to show you. These are all from a trip that my wife and I took previous year. So it was Christmas for 2018 and then New Year's going into 2019. We went to Central Europe, and this is the first one. It's called On Solchen Tagen. I got this at this super awesome art collective store in Berlin, and I couldn't get to a comic book store there. There were a couple comic stores in Berlin. The problem was we were there over Christmas and they were closed, and they were just closed. We couldn't get to them. So we did find this place though. Is this awesome art collective. It was so cool. They had all these art books and prints, and they actually had a gallery that was part of the store, and it was just so neat. And they had in there a bunch of indie, like self-published books, and I just started working on the first issue of my comic, The Crime Busters, when we were there, so I had been starting to pick up indie books and self-published books and sort of get into that scene. So I decided to get this as my souvenir for Berlin. It's a very sort of indie book, sort of German, sort of existential. I can't understand any of it, but there's a lot of like depressing scenes of like abandoned buildings and really depressed looking people talking. Berlin was great. I just loved the vibe there. It was so like electric, the all the art and everything there. It was just really cool. I wish I could have got to comic store. There's a couple things in particular I was looking for, but as we're gonna see in a minute, I did eventually find them in a totally different country. But before we get to that, we visited 4 countries on the trip. The last country we went to was Hungary. We went to Belfast, and that's where I got this. It's the Belfast edition of Marvels, the series by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross. Absolutely great cover. Again, they were just printing. This is brand new on the stands when I got there, so they're a ways behind. Here's the back cover advertising the next issue with the series finale with the death of Gwen Stacy and the death of Green Goblin, and it's just really cool. The whole thing is translated into Hungarian. This place was actually right near our Airbnb. We had rented an apartment in Budapest, and it was on the same street. It was just like a block down, so that was great. It was had seen better days, let's say. The building was in a lot of those cool buildings. They've got these cool inner courtyards and stuff, and this one was just like filled with rubble from like, I don't know, the top level was just collapsing, so it was just like rubble and like trash and stuff. But if you go through there, like under the eaves, and there's this little doorway. There was this little hole in the wall comic store where they had American comics, and then they had American comics translated into Hungarian. So I was really excited to get this. They didn't have any old comics. There's a couple things that I heard about while I was over there that I really wanted to try and track down, but it was impossible. Basically, there were some bootleg, like Marvel prints that were done during the Cold War behind the Iron Curtain that were sort of like traded secretly. And of course, those are basically impossible to find. I was really hoping to get some in Hungary, because Budapest is a place where apparently they printed a lot of those, but there was no sign of those. But I did get this. Very cool. Something interesting to note is the size. You can see compared to a regular size comic, it's actually slightly smaller than a regular size comic. I'm not sure I would have immediately noticed if I didn't have it with, other comics. But really cool, really cool. Budapest was a really interesting, vibrant city. Okay, so and I saved the coolest for last. So I mentioned when I was in Germany, there was something specifically that I was looking for, and I couldn't find it because I couldn't get to the comic store. And that is that there was a German publisher who in 1970 started doing these runs of all the Marvel books, and they did these very faithful reproductions of the whole Marvel line. In particular, I wanted to get some issues of Avengers. They reprinted the first 100 issues of Avengers, except they skipped issue 6 because issue 6 has the first appearance of Zemo, and because of the laws there, they couldn't show that stuff because there was too much Nazi stuff in it. So they skipped issue 6 of Avengers, but they reprinted the whole rest of the run, the first 100 issues. And I had seen pictures of these online. Again, these are started in 1970. I really wanted to get them. Couldn't find them anywhere in Germany because stores were closed. But when we went to Austria, in Vienna, I found a comic store that was open. And the guy had all these long boxes. He had a bunch of tons of back issues of American comics, but he had a huge selection of all of these awesome German editions. And I managed to find, they didn't have the issue I was looking for because I really wanted the first appearance of the Vision, issue 57, which over there is issue 56 because they skipped one. But I did get a couple other cool ones. Here's number 84 in their version, 85 in ours. You can see that they faithfully redid the whole cover just with their version of the Avengers logo. But otherwise, it's basically the same. They've got a weirdly miscolored Vision in the corner box. Of course, Vision was the cornerback's person in the Avengers for 10 years in the US. This is one of my favorite stories and one of my favorite covers, so I wanted to get this one. And then the big one is Avengers Assemble, which in this case, I'm not sure even how to pronounce this with the umlaut here. If this is Rocker, I think it's just Rocker. Rocker Sammeln! Please, if you know German, don't laugh at me too hard. I don't know how to speak German. But anyway, classic Avengers 16. Here is number 15. There's some weird coloring going on here where Captain America's entire shirt is blue, even the white stripes are blue. But just an awesome. I was so excited to see this. They didn't have a number 1 or a number 4, and they didn't have 57. So these are the ones that I ended up getting. But it was still, I was really excited to get a one of the classic Avengers covers in the German edition. So anyway, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed this. I do love talking about my travel. I tried to keep the travel talk down a little bit because I almost went on several extended stories about some of the different cities. I tried to keep it comics focused, but those are some of my experiences going to comic stores in other countries and some of the cool souvenir comics that I've gotten. And I hope you enjoyed watching this. And at some point, if you're interested, I do have a few other really neat foreign editions that I can show off in some other format. But anyway, just let me know what you think. I've got a subscribe thing here. I've got some other videos to watch, and I'll see you next time.